Hi, it's Dave. Welcome to episode 245. So in this live stream, we're going to go ahead and take a look at this past week's Tesla and Tesla competitor related news. And I'm going to be sharing kind of my perspective on some of the stuff going on. And rather than just kind of take a surface, kind of shallow level look at the news, as what's typically portrayed in the media, I want to take a couple steps deeper down. And so this is kind of a typical exercise of how I process news to help you kind of see kind of my thought process. And I think the bigger picture is I'm looking at the health of the company and to see if there are really significant moves, if there are significant developments going on, not just with Tesla or its competitors or the industry, and to see what the implications are and how that changes kind of my future perspective and views on investing. All right, I want to welcome you guys on the live stream. Thanks for those who are joining in. All right, so first, let's go ahead and let's look at some tabs I have open. So we have Tesla stock has closed at $852 this Friday. Market cap is about $800 billion. And you saw we had a dip of earnings last week. Tesla's gross margin kind of was a bit low. I think it's mostly due to price reduction during the quarter. It kind of spooked some people, but then you have nice recovery this past week. The high was about 880 or so. And then you had kind of bouncing around at about 850. So we're kind of in this range, 800 to about 900 this past week. All right, so let's look at some news that is going on with some of Tesla's competitors. So first, Apple's in talks with Hyundai and Kia, but these talks have been paused. So there's a lot of news going on that Apple might open up a plant in Georgia with Kia. So here's what's going on. Hyundai Motors is this massive umbrella company that has Hyundai car brand and Kia car brand underneath. So it's actually the same company. They share a lot of the same kind of parts and stuff in their cars. So Apple is looking into Hyundai and Kia to make their car in a plant in Georgia. And the key question here says is how serious Apple is about taking on Tesla, General Motors, and other electric vehicle makers, and whether it needs an established manufacturer to be able to roll out its own product. All right, so now here's what's going on. I think a lot of people tend to discount the Apple car, say, hey, there's no chance the Apple car can really pose a threat to Tesla. However, some people think it's going to be this huge thing that Tesla is going to dominate Tesla. So what's going on? In my perspective, we have to look at what does Apple car bring to the table. I think first off, it brings kind of this cohesiveness and this unity of the operating system with your smartphone. All of your messages, your photos, your apps, and etc. It's all on your smartphone. You get into your car and it's the same experience, right? So you have nice screens. You could continue to watch your movies, listen to the same music. And so I think the operating experience and what Apple already has in people's lives and daily lives, that's their advantage. That's what their value proposition. And the second value proposition is the quality of Apple, kind of the user experience, the whole look and feel, etc. On the flip side, the challenges that Apple has is, first off, is on profit. See, because they're not really manufacturing the car themselves, they have to have a contract manufacturer. They need to kind of have that margin. Now with an iPhone, they're able to mark up the iPhone a lot, right? Over 50% because the parts are relatively cheap, right? With the car, however, you're not going to be able to get gross margins of like 50% just off of its parts because you have the whole car industry is basically rock bottom margins. So Apple will have to rely on software and probably on full self-driving, this type of autonomous driving software. But how can Apple really get a ton of money with full self-driving if Tesla is in the lead and is increasing the lead with all of the cars on the road and the data that Tesla has? So it puts Apple in a tough situation. How can they make the profit that they need to when Tesla is so far ahead with the main profit kind of factor, which is software and autonomous driving? So, and then the second thing is Apple has some disadvantages with service centers. Like, where are you going to service your Apple car? Do you go to Hyundai dealer? So then it's becoming like a Hyundai, right? Apple has to set up their whole infrastructure of logistics, and it's actually quite complex. How about supercharging, right? So Apple really, if they want to make run at Tesla, they really need to go head in. But why go head in 2021? You should have gone head in, right, in 2015 or, you know, sometime earlier when the Model 3 hadn't come out. Why wait until after, not just the Model 3 has come out, but it's gone through already a couple of iterations, it's getting better. Tesla has already moved on. It's not about the Model 3, it's about, right, the Gen 4 car, the $25,000 car that's going to hit, right, probably in a couple of years. And so it's almost as if Apple is chasing Tesla's yesterday's plans, right? And just because Apple can come up with a nice, let's say, Model 3 competitor, it doesn't mean that Apple really has a chance, because Tesla is already way ahead making plans for the next big market. And to think that Apple can come up with a $25,000 car right off the bat, I think just isn't realistic, because think about it, how many years did it take for Tesla to really develop all of the parts, all of the systems, all of the engineering to really get down the cost of the Model S to the Model 3 level, and then the Model 3 level to the Gen 4 car level or Model 2 level. This is like, you know, decade and a half worth of work that Tesla's gone into, and Apple is just kind of, you know, waiting and, you know, taking their time. I think in some ways, the slow pace of Apple is killing Apple right now. You know, if you're gonna go after Tesla, you got to move fast, right? And for Apple to take all this time, it just is really bringing some skepticism to the seriousness of Apple's plans. All right, here we have Biden. He's defending passing the $1.9 trillion stimulus without Republican support. So we have, you know, breaking news this morning that the Senate had passed it with Kamala Harris giving the tie-breaking vote. And so, yeah, we're going to have probably the stimulus pass through. Now, this stimulus package probably will have hundreds and hundreds of different tiny clauses that every politician and all their, you know, regions and, you know, constituencies have, you know, lobbied for, et cetera, to put in. So, you know, that's the tough part about politics, is like sometimes consensus and, you know, governing by consensus is all these different interests can make things actually more complicated. And you have absolutely no Republicans supporting this at this time. All right, let's go on to the Tesla die casting. So Tesla just released this interesting video. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this video here. And so this looks like the Fremont factory, and they have kind of like a tent-like structure up. And you have this die casting machine. This is the world's largest die casting machine that allows Tesla to make a single piece, right, rear and front casting. And if you look at this, check this out, man. This thing is, yeah, it's taking it out. This robot is taking out this whole single piece, right? And it's like hot. That's just amazing. So here's a few thoughts. Why is this under a tent? Like, that's crazy. There's probably a few reasons. First, it's so big. How do you get into the building without like taking apart like a huge section of the building? So maybe it's just easier to, right, to stick it in the tent. Number two, it's probably cheaper to get it in the tent, right? Faster permits, etc. And then check out the size of this thing, right? It's just so huge. It's just making like entire huge section of the car with just one die casting machine. Who in the world is going to try this of Tesla's competitors, right? Who is going to try to make a massive die casting machine, like the machine that makes the machine? And who is going to stick it in a tent just so they could roll it out faster? And who's going to stick it in production like this quick? There's so many things that are happening here that is so unique to Tesla. Like, this is purely Tesla, truly Tesla here. Any other car company, or every other car company, this would take like a decade to do, because you have to go through all these iterations, right? Make a whole entire plant. And then they would be so risk adverse to try this, right? Because it takes so many iterations to really get it right and to stick it into production. There's just so much risk to come up with kind of these step changes that typically, you know, most car companies, they don't want to take on those risks. The rewards don't matter that as much. For Tesla and Elon, this is just the culture of Tesla, to push the envelope, stick it in a tent, right? Stick it as fast as possible, push it out in the production line. You know, there could be some risk of making mistakes, but we'll correct the mistakes as we go. I think this culture is some of the things that really set aside Tesla. Man, check that out, die casting machine in a tent. Amazing. All right, Tesla, Ray for Tesla tweets, and he says, Tesla's Supercharger factory is now officially open. This is out near Giga, Shanghai, and it's located just a couple kilometers away, and it's designed to crank out 10,000 version 3 supercharger units annually. So check it out, man. Tesla is doing stuff that's not even advertised. They're not even pumping this, advertising this. They're making a supercharger factory, right, that can pump out 10,000 version 3 supercharger units annually. I mean, in other words, they're already achieving massive economies of scale, which in turn reduces the price, right, per supercharger unit. But not just that, it allows them to improve the technology of all their superchargers and their units. This is just great that Tesla is thinking like this. They're really trying to optimize like all parts, of the experience. All right, here we have Electric is saying that Tesla's updated the Model Y timeline in Europe, right, to hint at production starting in mid-2021. So Tesla's updated its online configurator in Europe to show a more precise delivery time of mid-2021. So there you got it. And yeah, it could mean that Tesla's going to start production sometime in the next few to several months. Let's check out actually here, Elon Musk tweeted several days ago a Gigafactory Berlin progress update video. And if you look at this, my goodness, this is like, it's snowing, so it's probably delaying, progress of construction a bit. But this thing is huge. And the bulk of it, right, the foundation, a lot of the walls, some of the roof, all this stuff is already up. I would imagine, once the weather warms up a bit, they're going to be able to finish this thing off, and we're going to see Tesla, Giga Berlin going on a hiring spree. They'll probably have some hiring fairs, just hire a ton of people, and they're going to, start to get these people to work. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's February right now. Do we see a completion of all this in 3 or 4 months? And then, maybe starting initial production. But the big question is 4680 cells, right? How do we get these 4680 cells in quantity sufficient enough to provide for, a whole new production line in Model Y? And so I'm keeping my expectations kind of realistic and conservative because a lot of things have to match up. It's not just the car production, it's the battery production. I think that's the key. They already know how to make the Model Y, the car. They have the presses, they have the assembly lines, all of that. But to make the 4680 cells in quantity, that is the question. And that's the thing that I'm looking for. All right, so we have Reuters saying Indonesia receives investment proposal from Tesla. Indonesia's received investment proposal from U.S. EV maker Tesla, the country's deputy head for investment and mining coordination, Septian Haryo Seto, told reporters on Friday. So what's going on here? This official says he's received their proposal yesterday morning and he will meet with them virtually to get an explanation. So they're having a Zoom meeting or something. And he says he can't go into details because of NDA. Tesla's obviously going to, do an NDA, but the discussion has been on batteries and energy storage solutions. So we're talking about making batteries, energy storage solutions. I think this is a clue. Could Tesla be talking to Indonesia to be making basically a huge power pack, mega pack factory out in Indonesia? I'm thinking, could they do something for cars? At first I'm thinking maybe, but then, and maybe just have the battery packs ship out. But what if Tesla made a deal with Indonesia, say, hey, we'll make a huge energy storage, power pack, mega pack, factory. We'll just do crazy amounts of cells and packs here, but we need to ship nickel out of Indonesia to our other gigafactories as well, so that we can make packs, like cells and packs in those countries for cars. So that's a possibility. Here's the thing with Indonesia. Indonesia used to be a top exporter of nickel, but they stopped nickel shipments last year in an effort to develop a full nickel supply chain, starting from extraction, then processing into metals and chemicals used in batteries to meet the demand for electric vehicles. In other words, Indonesia is making a move and they're saying, we don't want to be just a supplier of nickel because we want to extract more value out of that supply chain, meaning we want people to make real products in our country using the nickel rather than just exporting and taking our nickel. And so they're interested in people who want to build stuff. And that's what Tesla is saying. They're saying, hey, we are wanting to build stuff in your country, batteries and maybe energy storage products, maybe even battery packs. I don't know what the situation is, but this is speculation for now. It's interesting stuff. and we'll keep an eye out on it. All right, let's go into Ford. Now, Ford is saying that they're investing into electric vehicles. So let's check out what Ford is saying here. So their new CEO, or relatively new, is saying we're not going to cede the future to anyone. Our electric strategy is very specific. We're going to invest in segments where we're the dominant player and we have scale, like the F-150, the Transit van, our Mustang. So here's Ford's strategy. It's saying, hey, let's go where we're strongest, and that's the F-150, right? The Transit van and Mustang. I think that's, relatively smart strategy, but, I kind of think you got so much legacy kind of systems, bureaucracy, goals. You have legacy factories, workers, etc., just weighing down Ford. It seems like to make this massive shift to not just electric vehicles, but to autonomy as well, it's not going to be easy for a legacy company like Ford. It would make more sense, I think, to do a spin-off, to kind of make a division, kind of an independent subsidiary or something, from Ford, put a bunch of money into it, send your best engineers to there, and give some equity to people too, and try to make a legit company that doesn't have the legacy and the drawbacks of an existing, let's say, Ford company. Here it says Ford's all-electric Transit van is expected to arrive late this year. That's pretty cool. 2021 Ford Transit van electric. I think it's gonna be great. I think that's a good move. Right now you have Rivian that has the market. You could have some other places like Workhorse, but I think if Ford gets into it, they have some type of opportunity. Mercedes-Benz isn't really getting into the Sprinter electric Sprinter market that much, so there's an opening. But this just kind of proves out the market. It doesn't really mean much if you're the first to the market. It means most if you're the best, like ongoing, if you have the ability to defend your superior over time. So I think this will just prove out the market for Tesla to be able to justify, making an awesome electric van that I don't think others can compete. Why won't others be able to compete? Because think about it, it's economics. Like you have massive economies of scale with the batteries, and think about it, Tesla's just making, multiple times the amount of batteries. Their technologies are evolving faster. It's not just the batteries, every single part of the electric powertrain with their motors, with all their electronics, battery management systems, their software, everything is just proven over multiple generations. The cost to get this out is so low. That's why, for example, with the Tesla Semi, they could just, whip some stuff together, whip the battery packs and the motors and the screens, and they've got like a prototype. Sure, they have to mass produce this, but they got the pieces already. And that's the thing with Tesla. They already have the pieces developed over the past 15 years. And now they're entering into mass or economies of scale, which drive down the cost, which give them an unfair advantage in a sense. It's fair, but unfair advantage in a sense into new product segments. What advantage does Ford have in electric transit vans? Barely anything. Sure, they have the Ford name. Sure, they have the transit van, look and logo, whatever. But they have to remake a lot of the transit van in terms of its powertrain, and they don't have the economies of scale. They have the economies of scale on the doorknobs, and the headlights and stuff that doesn't really matter. It's not really changing that much. It doesn't really cost that much. And Tesla can already, get close to that anyways with those parts. So, yeah, it's a tough battle for folks like Ford to really try to make a dent. All right, here's what Ford is also doing. I thought this was interesting. Ford says they have inked a deal with Google Android. And here's what's going on. On Monday, the automaker announced a new partnership with Google that will see the tech giant's Android operating system power future Ford vehicles. The digital experience will begin rolling out to new Ford and Lincoln cars in 2023 and provide Google services built directly into the car. So what's going on? It seems like Ford is saying, hey, we want Android, Google's Android in our car to take over our infotainment, our whole navigation system. So here it says Google Maps will be the primary navigation system. Google Assistant will be ready and willing to execute commands from the car, and Google Play will provide optimized apps for Ford vehicles for music, podcasts, and more. So Google is expanding into official partnerships, but making it stronger. And then Google and Ford said they'll create Team Upship, which will help the automaker streamline operations with help from Google's cloud, artificial intelligence, and machine learning tech. So it seems like Google is trying to help with AI and trying to help the whole manufacturing, product development, supply chain management. So it's not as aggressive of a lockup or partnership that I think perhaps Google and would want, but you've got Google taking over the infotainment. That's what Google wants. But I think Google also wants one step further. And I think they want the ability to be able to take over full self-driving or autonomous driving in OEMs, right? They want to be kind of the Android to Tesla's iOS, if you say. And I think they know that they need to do it in steps. So first you ink these partnerships with the whole infotainment system, get Google Android on, you offer, more, driving type of features. If you look at Volvo's Polestar car, actually it uses Google Android. This is not the projection of the phone. It's actually a separate operating system for cars that Google has made. They call it Android, but it's actually quite native in a sense to the cars. And it controls a lot of the car's functions, right? With the Volvo Polestar, you can control the climate, see the battery life condition, connect with your app, etc. A lot of the features that actually Tesla has too. So it's interesting. I'm watching these developments because I think how aggressive folks like Google go after the autonomous driving market is going to be very important to how Tesla can monetize and how they treat the rollout in terms of autonomous driving and what type of, I guess, margins they can get, right? It all depends. Like, let's say Google's super aggressive and they give all this autonomous driving software and, stuff for free. That is something that is not positive necessarily for Tesla's margins. You can say, oh, but Google is way behind. That's true. Google is behind. But it's all depending on how aggressive Google is in the next several years. Now, this stuff isn't stuff that's going to happen next year or next 2 or 3 years. This stuff is actually more long-term. So we're talking about 5 or 10 years down the road, right? That Google can actually maybe roll out enough Google Androids in cars and really get full self-driving out in a big way. But this is just stuff I think about, I mean, most people might be thinking about just today. And I'm like, hey, we need a long-term advantage. We need to be able to understand what's going on, not just today, but 5 or 10 years down the road. All right, we have some pictures of the Vw Id6 Elite. And when I look at these pictures, it's not bad. It's like, a decent, SUV. Well, I don't know, actually. It just kind of looks like a so-so, whatever, SUV. I mean, this is the tough part, I mean, it's like with VW, man, what do you do? I mean, geez, like what advantage over Tesla do you have? The only advantage that VW, had over Tesla previously, let's say a few years or several years ago, is economies of scale. They had, lots of cars, lots of parts, lots of factories. They could have huge supply chains, negotiate, great deals on, mirrors and headlights and rims and, trim pieces, or maybe they make their trim, but just stuff like that, right? The AC, pumps, all this stuff in the car. But now with Tesla gaining economies of scale and then, delivering 500,000 cars last year, now delivering, probably, who knows, maybe 800,000 or so next year. Like what Tesla's doing is they're bridging the gap with economies of scale, and they're also doing it by creating their own kind of in-house supply chain where they're creating and making their own parts. Like they're making their own seats, they're making a lot of their own trim. They have their own plastics department, own mirror glass departments, right? They're really pushing the envelope on materials, new materials science, really driving down the cost. So if there's a supplier that's lagging, if there's a supplier that just costs too much, Tesla says, hey, we're just going to move it in-house and save costs. So Tesla's doing this kind of dual approach. They're not afraid to take things in-house, and they're getting economies of scale. And so in this sense, VW doesn't have any advantage. And so now, Tesla is moving ahead with manufacturing by pushing the envelopes on how to make a car. Look at that die casting machine, right? They're actually removing, I think Elon was saying they removed like 300, robots just from that one machine. I think they could even double the removal by adding, the front casting piece too. But Tesla is just methodically and relentlessly pushing the envelope with technology and manufacturing, and then they're doing the same thing with batteries, and then they're doing the same thing with autonomous software. So on the software, that's where the margins are going to be. How can VW compete with Tesla with software? It's just, I don't know what you do if you're VW. I thought when Elon Musk said, hey, we're going to go private at 420, I thought at that time VW should have just said, hey, Tesla, take our money, we'll buy a third of your company, and I think at that time you probably could have forked over maybe 20 billion bucks, or $25 billion maybe, and got a third of Tesla. That's what VW should have done. They should have said, hey, $25 billion, here you go, Tesla. We'll take a third of your company, right? And take you guys private and just do whatever Elon tells, just to have equity in a company like Tesla. And then in terms of what to do with VW's legacy products, just let Elon decide, let Elon decide whether to keep it or to close shop or whatever. Basically, you got to know when your advantage is exhausted, right? And when it's a different day. All right, so let's take a look at this. So we have Rivian is hitting the road. So this is actually pretty cool. Amazon's here goes that Amazon is saying that actually they're starting delivering packages with Rivian vans. I think this is kind of cool. I have no ill will to Rivian or any other, EV manufacturer. I think it's great that people are trying to innovate, trying to push the envelope. So yeah, I'm glad that Rivian is pushing the envelope here, getting out these delivery vans quick as possible. Amazon is making big investments into these electric vans, trying to make the technology possible. And yeah, this is just great news for the overall industry. Whether or not Rivian will succeed, I think there's a lot of factors, but hey, if you've got Amazon backing you, right, with hundreds of thousands of orders, I think they've already announced 100,000 order. But yeah, if this can grow, if Amazon can take a big stake in the company, who knows what can happen with Rivian. But so, yeah, I think that's a cool development there. All right, so moving on to Starlink here. SpaceX says that they are still in beta, but they have more than 10,000 users worldwide. I think this is actually really cool. It's overlooked by, just a lot of people, but yeah, it's just in 4 months after entering beta, right there, SpaceX has amassed over 10,000 users. They've said in a petition to the FCC, and they want to be designated as an eligible telecommunication carrier, making it eligible for federal cash, including the money from the FCC's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund that it won in December. I think a few things on this. One is, man, what SpaceX is doing is probably one of the most significant efforts to bring rural development, right? Because if you think about what SpaceX is doing with Starlink, because the economy is so connected and because information is so valuable, you can have education, you can have like business ideas, you can have training, you can keep up to date, you can understand trends, right? Like information is power, and it's kind of like the glue that runs the economy. If you're in a rural or undeveloped area without a link, right, to the entire world, you're at an extreme disadvantage in so many facets. But what Starlink has the opportunity to do is has the opportunity to bridge that gap and to bring into connection a whole part of the world that right now is at a massive disadvantage. And I think we're talking about on a historic level what Starlink can do in terms of bridging and bringing actually economic activity to many parts of the world. And I think the magnitude of change that Starlink is bringing is humongous, and it's just getting started, right? They're still in beta, but they already have, I think, about over 1,000 satellites, and they're expanding very rapidly. All right, here we got Sawyer Merritt on Twitter, and he says, for a few weeks, he's been in contact with a source from a U.S. Tesla supplier, and he has some news on the Tesla Semi, but he says take it with a grain of salt. Timelines can change. So he says this supplier has started working on Tesla Semi stuff since Q4 2020. And the body they think will be built in Fremont, the final assembly at Giga, Nevada, and then eventually in Giga, Texas in 2022. Whether final assembly will take place both in Nevada and Texas or just switch to Giga, Texas when the factory is done is unclear. RC, release candidate builds, will start May 2021. So that's in 3 or 4 months. Pilot production will start in July 2021, and the start of production will be August 2021 for supplier parts. cumulative builds of 350 by August 2021. So volume production, 100 a week by end of 2021, 500 a week by end of 2022, sleeper cab by the mid 2021. Total build production is 25, 10,000, 25,000. So 25,000 by 2024. And EU startup production will be 2023. Sawyer says he knows the name of the supplier and location. He's seen some spreadsheets and presentations, so he believes the timelines, but hey, things can always change, so take it with a grain of salt. So let's look at this for a second here. So Tesla Semi, the big bottleneck, actually is not the technology. The technology is actually rather straightforward. It's the batteries, it's the motors, the powertrain, it's the software, etc. I was talking to some of these Tesla Semi engineers at Autonomy Day, and the head engineer, he was saying, to make actually a semi, it's easier than a passenger car because there aren't as stringent safety requirements for a semi. So actually, they were able to build a prototype very, very fast. The big issue with the Tesla Semi is basically the cost of the batteries, right? You're putting in a bunch of batteries into the Tesla Semi where you could use those batteries for multiple cars and get better margin and better profits. So why would you divert, right, car production and more profits to Tesla Semi, which would take up more batteries, right? The battery amount of batteries for multiple cars. So the whole issue is, Tesla's got to scale their 4680 production because that's the batteries that they need. And so this is actually pretty bullish news that Tesla has some confidence that they want to start production by, let's say July or August of this year and try to make 2,500 by the end of the year. I don't know the accuracy, and we have Sawyer, cool, man. We have Sawyer Merritt on, awesome. You got some good information here, man. You leaked some cool stuff here. So we have Sawyer on the live stream. Let me know if you type some stuff up, and I'll bring it into the screen if you have any more insights on the whole semi rollout here. But I think, one of the big issues is we need to get these 4680 cells up. But what they're saying is if this leak is true, it's showing confidence of how much Tesla is confident that they'll have enough 4680 cells going to supply for the semi, right? So this is good news. Again, I think 2021 is the year of the 4680, right? This is the big product. A lot of people are confused. They think it's the Cybertruck, or it's the Semi, or it's the Model Y in Berlin. But I think the product for 2021 is the 4680, right? This is what makes everything possible. It makes all the other products possible, and it determines all of their production capacities, right, and timelines over the next couple of years. So Sawyer Merritt says, thank you. Keep up the great work. Awesome, man. Sawyer Merritt, follow him on Twitter. He has some great leaking news. Sawyer Merritt. You can see it on the screen here. Awesome. Tesla community is great, man. We all, working together. This is live stream. All right, guys. This is awesome. So anyways, I just wanted to share kind of this week in Tesla news and competitors, and kind of give you maybe a little bit of a out of the box kind of angle on some of my perspective on what's going on. Hopefully that's helpful. It helps kind of make you think, or a bit from different angles. And actually, we have a few cool extra stuff. So Sawyer Merritt says the supplier built a few beta builds in Q4 2020. So that's cool. I'm assuming this is a Tesla Semi. So the suppliers are already working on building, right, the various parts that need to go into the Semi. And so, it's pretty cool because Tesla is working on so many products and they have so many supply chains, and they're working on so many continents. So a lot of people don't really realize is that they have a separate supply chain that they've developed and are developing in China, because they don't want to use the same suppliers as in Fremont, because you have to ship all, the products, or this, like, you want the supply chain to be closer to your factory. And China actually has some of the most amazing kind of manufacturing companies out there with great costs, super low, or super high expertise. And so initially when Tesla made the model, initially when Tesla made the Model 3 in Shanghai, they started with kind of this thing of, let's just push it out. Let's, ship parts from Fremont if we have to, but we'll slowly get a supply chain up in Shanghai. What the result is actually their costs are higher. So they're not making a ton of margin in the beginning. They're just trying to get out the cars. But what Tesla's been doing over the past, let's say, over the past year and a half, is they've been building out a supply chain near Shanghai or in China. And they've been slowly replacing all of the parts and stuff that they've been shipping from Fremont. And every kind of part that they replace with a local supply chain supplier is extra margin. Right? So this is why, Tesla's able to just have phenomenal margins with Shanghai, because they started actually with low margins, and it's this easy kind of just thing to accrue better margins because the supply chain is just awesome there. The same thing is going to happen, I think, with Giga Berlin, in that they're going to start off production. They're going to have to ship some stuff from Fremont or some suppliers, probably from China and from US or different places, but eventually they want to develop kind of a customized supply chain in the European market. Sure, there will be parts that they have to use from other suppliers, let's say from their Asia supply chain, et cetera, who just make better parts and cheaper parts. But if a local company can do a substantially better job cheaper, then they're going to choose that. So you're going to have this kind of bifurcation of different supply chains, right? Some will overlap, but they'll be regional specific, and this will lead to cost advantages. And this is all happening behind the scenes, right? And it's not talked about much, but yeah, I mean, this is kind of part of the ongoing kind of relentless execution, the pace of execution in what Tesla's doing. And this is one of the things that I always look out for, is not just the surface news on this is out or that is out, but rather, what does this show about the company, and how fast are they innovating, and is there any other company that's innovating as fast or faster? If there's a company that's innovating faster than Tesla, has a better product, yeah, that's awesome, man. And I might be one of the first to sign up to invest in that company. All right, Spectre says, what do you think? When do you think Starlink will have its IPO? Yeah, I can't wait for Starlink to have its IPO. My guess is probably in maybe 2.5 years. I think this whole year is kind of just slowly ramping up Starlink. I think 2022 is the breakout year for Starlink. You're going to just see Starlink just go crazy. Tesla just whipping out, tons of terminals and getting, hundreds of thousands of people on board. And I think probably 2023 might be a good year to IPO Starlink. Just my random guess. All right, Sam M says, would you buy Tesla at current prices? Yeah, I mean, this question is so loaded because I think just the fact that, for example, I have, over 95% of my portfolio in Tesla. I mean, that shows kind of my personal level of confidence in the long-term prospects of the company. There are certain reasons why I just kind of don't trade in and out of the stock. And a lot of that has to do with, first, tax consequences. Do I really want to pay taxes on a great company that I'm trying to hold long-term just to try to get in a better price? Second thing is, most of the time, I'm not super confident that I could predict prices enough to justify the tax hit. So, if my holdings were mostly in a tax deductible account, I could maybe have a better margin of safety where I could predict prices and I don't have to predict a 40% drop or something to justify, or 50% drop to justify the tax hit, right? So I'm kind of in this position where I've overextended myself early on, where I kind of had 100% Tesla margin for many, many years, and 100% allocation plus margin. So I was actually 100 and I don't know what, over 100% allocation with Tesla up until about 2017 or so. And then I took off margin and I've been at 100%, a little bit less than 100%. But yeah, my whole thing is, if I had, let's say, only cash, right? Let's say I had X amount of only cash, what would I do? And I kind of take it a little bit different because I'm looking for, kind of great opportunities, 10x opportunities. And if I had all just cash, it depends. this might sound kind of crazy, but I think Tesla would be one of the top 3 or 4 candidates of how I would deploy the cash. And it depends how much cash I had. But again, all of this is dependent on, I do a 2-basket approach where I have 1 basket of kind of safer income producing assets that are kind of, for stability, etc. set aside. I don't even think about, for me, that's real estate at this moment. And it has been for many years. So that kind of is set aside. It makes it so my second basket of assets is more optional and it can go to 0 and that's fine. So with those assets, I'm more aggressive. I'm looking for those greater gains. With that second basket of assets, if I had a decent amount, let's say in the millions or tens of millions, I would probably my top 3 or 4 candidates of how I would set aside that, depending on, the situation and circumstances. Probably, I would probably, Tesla's one. SpaceX would definitely be one in the private markets. Stripe would be one in the private markets. Those 3 would be kind of maybe the top 3 candidates. And I might divvy up some more into other players at different prices and different price points. I'm actually researching some interesting kind of short-term plays that I'm thinking about, but I might actually even have a short-term kind of account that I would do as well. But I think having just only cash, it gives a freedom to say, hey, I have a blank slate. Where would I go? If I don't need to worry about paying taxes or the cost to transfer. All right. Peter Chung, since you're holding the shares for the long term, would it be a good move to migrate the shares to IRA? Yeah, so I'm a big fan of IRAs. I kind of got into the whole investing game kind of a little bit later, like in terms of understanding the benefits of what an IRA does. If I knew what I know now, I would have started an IRA very early, and it would have been a Roth IRA, and put the max amount possible. Research not just the max amount, but the super max. Like if you watch some stuff and read some articles, there's different ways not just to max out your Roth IRA, but to do like super max out your Roth IRA. It's just an amazing instrument to be able to not to pay taxes like on trades, on investments, and to carry that over time. If you understand compounding, to take out the tax element is humongous. I mean, gosh, this is one of the biggest hacks available in investing is to have a tax deductible, especially a Roth IRA account. So definitely, max out Roth IRAs. That's definitely a no-brainer. All right. Jaga says, what do you think of Tesla creating its own currency backed by energy from storage, solar, as well as people renting their cars on Tesla network? Tesla would get a cut of each transaction. Yeah, I think it's a super interesting idea. I think there's going to be a onslaught of different ways that people use digital currencies to create kind of sub ecosystems and link to larger ecosystems. I think definitely there's so many options that Tesla can explore with that. I think in some ways, timing wise, it needs to be proven out a little bit more by maybe some smaller players to really justify any risks, right, for Tesla to really jump into it. All right. Montana says, did you watch the Lucid CEO interview today? No, I haven't. I did see kind of the article about Lucid. And Lucid, I'm not betting against Lucid. I think they're in a hot field. They got some smart engineers. I'm not per se betting. Actually, I do have a position. Oh, man. I do have a speculative position, a very small position on CCIV, which is, at least from my knowledge, is a possible spec. But who knows? Things can change. All of my stuff is stream of consciousness too. So I might not have this position, in a couple of days. But yeah, I think Lucid in some ways, there could be demand for their product or their engineering and their talent. I don't know long-term wise though. Hi Dave, long-time listener. First comment: how can an individual with millions in cash invest in SpaceX or Stripe now? Yeah, there's a huge kind of private equity market, but it's very competitive, so it's not actually that easy. Just having millions of dollars of cash doesn't really do much. It lets you have access to certain private companies that are raising, but a lot of the private companies with the highest demand, they don't really offer a lot of their shares, and some of the companies are so stringent they don't even allow their employees to pass on shares at all. They will veto and just restrict all that. So it's a whole field that actually is quite complex. And Stripe and SpaceX are probably the two most sought after private companies out there. Peter Chung says, "Is it too late to move into Roth IRA?" Yeah, no, check it out. Do some reading. Whatever age you are, whether you're 20 years old or 60 years old, it doesn't matter. Roth IRA is just an amazing instrument. And you look at the maxes, but don't just trust what the first articles you see. There are many ways to super max your Roth IRA in some ways. Yeah, so Nicholas says, Roth IRA means nothing to non-US. Yeah, okay, so it's just a tax deductible or tax advantaged account, so you don't pay taxes on the trades. A Roth in the US allows you not to pay taxes on the trades, but when you pull the money, you don't even have to pay taxes on it, right? So it's just the most amazing instrument ever, if you can take advantage of it. The negative is there are limits on on how much you can contribute every year. Yeah, Pierre says PSTH and Stripe. I've said this before, it's not happening. Stripe, if you understand the founders, if you've been following the founders for more than just a couple of years, you understand these guys are long-term. Stripe is the hottest private company. They're going to IPO over $100 billion. There's no need for a SPAC. You SPAC because you want to faster, right? You don't want to build up your entire, departments to really meet all the scrutiny and really just go through a long process. You want to do it faster and just get another company to help you. But if you're big enough, you want to do it yourself. You want to do it right. That's Stripe. It makes no sense for Stripe to go SPAC. All right, Chris Genovi says, Dave, have you ever experienced a grave error in investing or trading? And can you say a few words of comfort or encouragement for anyone who made a mistake like getting caught up in GME? Yeah, this happens a lot. It's the emotions, like get into, you get into the emotions and you start to FOMO, you think you're the only one missing out, right? And you just want to get in. And that is... And I think in some ways it's almost necessary to understand and to respect the markets. And that's the natural progression. When you first get into trading and investing, you don't really respect the markets. You kind of minimize kind of what's happening and you think a sure thing is a sure thing. After time, if you get burned enough, you get kind of this respect for the markets and how it could just slap and just destroy people's wealth. Left and right, and it has this mind of its own. And there's so many players in the market. Like, just to think that the market is dominated by certain hedge funds or certain things, that's in my opinion, a minimized view. When you can respect the markets to understand that no one player has that type of influence because it's so massive. There's so many trillions of dollars of activity that are going just massively fast back and forth. There's kind of like awe of the markets. It's really huge. And I think my encouragement would be, it's natural. Everyone has been burned. One of my first investments back at the .com bubble is I took a $10,000 account, went up to 40 and went back to 10, all like within several months. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, whatever, right? And that's the thing. You just think it's just a stock symbol, and you put it in and you hope that it goes up. And there's no rhyme or reason. And I think a lot of this stuff is, it's something that my kind of angle would be, and advice would be to start off with small positions and actually don't be afraid of making mistakes. Who cares if you lost some money on AMC or GME? That's okay, that's fine, But if you make it a big percent of your portfolio, then the pain might be too hard, or it might be so traumatic you don't even want to invest anymore, right? You get so discouraged. But if the pain is just a couple percent, like 1% or 2%, max 5%, then you're able to say, it's not painful enough where you're traumatized, but it's painful enough where you learn. So you want that balance, right? You want to learn, but you don't want to be like discouraged so much that you just toss in the towel and say, forget all this. And And that's the key. It's also one thing that if you notice Emmett Peppers, he keeps on talking about is kind of these small positions on riskier bets. Like he's not going to do a big risky bet with a huge percent of his portfolio because he could lose it all. And he's, anyone who's traded has lost a lot on different positions. Like, yeah, I've lost on positions. I don't share all my option trade. I don't do a ton. I'm kind of growing more in just different things. But there are times where, yeah, I put on a small option trade for Tesla. I thought possibly Tesla for this past quarter would do their deferred tax credit, 1 point something or $billion, and right, that would go straight to the income, and that would be a headline piece, and that Tesla could really, jump. So I did a small kind of out of the money option call, like 10 days out from Q4 earnings, and it was way out of the money, short-term call, tiny percent of my portfolio because, yeah, it's tiny because it's a risky play, right? And then I know that the chances are it's going to go to zero. So, I mean, that's one thing I actually learned from Emmett too, is not to be afraid of opportunities that actually might have more than 50% chance of going to zero, as long as the upside is so great that it outweighs it. If you can be at 10x or something. So, on that bet, I lost most of it. Actually, I cashed out the next day for maybe like 15% or 20% of the value of the call position, but that's fine. That's like great, I mean, because it's a small position, meaning you do your losses, but you do it so small for the highest risks, right? And you can manage that in a way where, if there is some no-brainer, low-risk thing that, is something like a stock, or perhaps, I mean, leaps are naturally higher risk, right? But if there's some special situation, you might be able to do more. But I think a lot of it is how you approach kind of how much you lose. And I think that's the tempting part. When you're dealing in the beginning, you want to risk a lot because you need it to grow a lot, right? Let's say you have $5,000 and you're thinking, hey, I need to grow this fast. My friends have like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I saw some guy have millions. I need more. So you're thinking, I need to do crazy, option calls or something to make this up fast. And you risk all of it, but then the question is, how fast can you replenish that? I think it's okay if you can replenish it fast. You have a high income job, etc. But if it takes a long time to replenish it, then you got to think twice about how much to risk. So those are just kind of some words of wisdom or folly, however way you choose to take it. You can take it, and I'm not saying I'm not claiming to have all this wisdom either. It's up to you guys. Whoever, you take what you can, right? You take, if it makes sense, maybe you take. If it doesn't make sense, maybe it just doesn't. You just toss it because it's not helpful. All right, Chintan says, "Hey Dave, is it a good idea to have separate brokerage accounts for long-term and more speculative portfolios?" I mean, that's what I do. For some reason, I get this mental block when I see a portfolio that is like mixed for me, or I do spec plays in my kind of together with long-term holdings. It's just like, I don't know it's like, for me, it's just confusing to me. I'm like, yeah, it's a mental block. But so I have like, a few other brokerage accounts. I do spec plays, but then the challenging part for me is like, oh man, now I have to go to another brokerage account setup, and sometimes I forget about a brokerage account if it's like too small compared to other accounts. So there's different challenges. It's whatever kind of makes it work for you, right? I mean, in the beginning you might not need more than one or two accounts, but yeah, I think I wouldn't be afraid of having accounts, because, for example, you might need a Roth Ira as an account. Set that up, get that going, and you might have a personal account or something. And if the account grows over time, you might want to diversify. But that's kind of what happened to me. I kind of want to diversify holdings after a while. Justin said, IRA is tax deferred. Yes, thank you for the clarification. Tax deferred means you're paying taxes later, but actually it depends. A traditional IRA is tax deferred, but a Roth IRA is actually, you're not, deferring your taxes, you're just not paying your taxes. So it's a tax advantaged account in a sense too. Yeah, Honeyjam says, so Roth IRA is TFSA in Canada. Exactly. TFSA it's a similar tax advantage account in Canada. Amazing instrument, man. If you're in Canada, get set up with TFSA. I mean, there's certain times that the government gives these hacks for investments, and removes the tax equation. And I don't know, I think you just got to get in like those. That's the crazy thing. So I have a person who's contacted me a few weeks ago, and he's traded in his health savings account in the US. It's called HSA. And he's traded options and Tesla and a bunch of stuff. And this account has like over $1 million now, because I mean, you don't start out with $1 million, you just start out with, several thousand here or there, but he's traded in his health savings account. It's a tax advantage account too. And it's crazy. I mean, I'm trying to get him on. He's kind of preparing some of his, I'm making sure all of the stuff is legit. So looking through his statements, and he's preparing kind of, some spreadsheets and stuff. But I think it's kind of cool. Like, hey, how does a person use a HSA, health savings account in the U.S. to, make $1 million or more in profit? So, yeah, I'm telling you, like, I'm always open to people who think outside of the box. Yeah, in a legal way, obviously. Jasphere Singh says, in your opinion, is the next big thing in the world of technology, which will give many opportunities like the internet back in the days? So I'll give some background on this stuff. A lot of the stuff I think is changing. Check out ARK Invest Big Ideas 2021. I thought it was decent. It's pretty good. It gives some different ideas in terms of kind of what is going on. I kind of think the bigger idea is artificial intelligence. I don't know how you could get much bigger than that. It's just so huge in its capability and, just the future impact. And I think the next step is, how does artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera, really kind of infiltrate, right, products and services and culture? And I think what you're seeing with Tesla and autopilot, full self-driving, is just one of those applications, right, coming to fruition. And whoever is in that pole position or that top executing, the best of the best, right, world executor level, can take advantage, leverage the AI machine learning to a point where it's just not even close, right, exponentially more power, right, and market share than the next competitor. I think that's what technology does. In a way, it kind of does this thing where it doesn't equalize the field of companies. It kind of makes it unequal, where the people who really are good, they get this outsized kind of power with technology. That's kind of what we've seen in the past 10 or 15 years with kind of the big tech conglomerates or tech companies. I think we're going to see probably, some of perhaps the largest companies in the world come out, from kind of this advent of, artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think biotech is going to be huge. I'm still looking out for the big winner. I think it's going to be interesting how this plays out with CRISPR and gene editing and the ethics involved too, and how to approach that as an investor. I think this is a huge area. Crypto, I'm warming up to in terms of like what I'm warming up to is not necessarily Bitcoin completely. I understand Bitcoin actually better in conjunction with what I think is perhaps a bigger movement, which is kind of a decentralized, not just finance, but decentralized kind of economies that are in its infancy stage right now, but have reached a tipping point where now you have billions of dollars of transactions happening in these decentralized economies, and it's creating value. So I never want to discount value that's being created and innovation that's happening. So you've got thousands of companies and teams innovating, creating value, billions of dollars coming. So you almost have this alternative universe going on. That's an alternative economy that's springing up. And yeah, I think there's going to be huge opportunities in terms of investing there. I think also it's a little bit controversial, but metaverses also are kind of interesting to me. Kind of this whole concept of, entire worlds. And one of the reasons is because the technologies are enabling the more realistic, right, experience of different environments, and the technology is just getting better. I mean, that's one thing. Like whether we like it or not, and there are pros and cons to this, but technology is improving to the point where it's not going backwards. Like in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, it's just getting faster, better, etc. The fidelity of metaverses today will be like child's play compared to the fidelity of metaverses 10 years from now, right? And so there's huge applications. In a sense, Neuralink is kind of a metaverse play as well, because you have this brain link, right? And it becomes a platform where the metaverse can be directly in your head. Again, lots of, it's complex, but perhaps, the biggest companies in the world are definitely things we have yet to see. And, I think Neuralink could definitely become perhaps, bigger than Tesla. Which is kind of crazy to think about, but I'm not going to give a time frame. I think that Neuralink still is ways out, meaning bigger than Tesla, maybe in 30 years, in 40 years. I don't know what the time frame. It's so ambiguous because who knows how, technology progresses over time. Cheering Sherpa says, Dave, I got burned back in 2018. I was betting on Facebook earning results with 100K margin and it tanked 20%. I wanted to cry, but I learned so many lessons. Don't be greedy. Patience is the key. Yeah, again, great lessons. I mean, that's the thing. Everyone goes through these lessons of betting too much. I've lost a lot in the past betting too much. How much did I lose? I gained a lot too. Different ways. It goes both ways. But like I've lost 6 figures on a trade. That's it's just, I mean, it's just stuff you learn. But again, if you could kind of take the lesson and learn that start with smaller positions, so the burn doesn't have to be too big, and learn your edge. Like that's the thing. Find where your edge is, your competitive edge. And you might think, oh, my competitive edge is just following somebody or following some publication, right, or something. But I don't know if that's a real competitive edge. I mean, that's a little bit shaky there. I think, and each person's competitive edge can be a little different, but that's the skill set and the tool set. I think that. The long term, or the person who succeeds or has outsized gains over many decades, that's what is probably at the heart of it, is a tool set of tools where they've learned how to get that competitive edge in the market. And it can be different from anyone else. All right, Wolfgang Martin, what is risk? Is Tesla risk or a no-brainer? From my point, it is a no-brainer. Yeah, risk is interesting. I kind of always see risk. I see both sides. On one side, you could say Tesla's a no-brainer, right? I mean, you could say, in 10 years, are people going to want more of Tesla stock or company or less, right? Is Tesla going to be doing millions of cars, or are they going to be struggling, like not even selling 1 million cars, right? You could, definitely make a strong case to say, Tesla in 10 years is much higher. But the question, though, is not just that. It's not just, is Tesla going to be a bigger company? But there's a lot of companies who grow, but their stock languish or actually go down over time because they were valued at such a high valuation at a certain point. They never were able to realize the potential of that valuation. So over time, their valuation actually goes down. Let's say over 5 years or 10 years, they never even reached their peak valuation that they're valued at 5 or 10 years ago. Even though they've grown a lot as a company, they just didn't grow enough or as much as the market expected. So here is probably the biggest, I think, risk factor with Tesla stock is Tesla stock. People are giving a lot of benefit of the doubt, attributing a lot of valuation to the future performance of Tesla. There's always that risk that Tesla doesn't perform as much, right, as perhaps the market is giving credit for, which is like, it's already almost it's $800 billion market cap, but that could be, it's close to $1 trillion. There aren't that many companies that are valued at that high. But on the flip side, you could say, hey, there aren't many companies in the multi-trillion-dollar transportation, multi-trillion-dollar energy markets, et cetera, with the dominance that Tesla has. So you can balance it out. But risk is something that I think whenever you go into an investment, the red flag that comes up when I kind of hear from some people is they think this has no risk, whatever investment it would be. I hear this a lot. Someone might pitch me something like, oh my gosh, this is so great, I see no risk at all, right? And that's kind of the red flag, because it shows me that maybe the person doesn't understand the other side enough, right? I could go on actually for 3 hours or longer on the risks of Tesla. I can actually give probably the best or one of the best bear cases of Tesla probably out there because I just understand it. I understand the other side. It's part of my brain. It's in here, and so I think with investments, I think that's pretty key. I was reading this one quote by Charlie Munger. He's saying something to the extent of you don't really know something well enough unless you know the other side, right? Almost better than even the people arguing it in a sense, right? So the exact quote, you probably have to look it up, but the whole idea is, we are blinded oftentimes by many factors. But if you can get into the other side, understand the other side so well that you can argue the other side and beat out in arguments all of the people on the other side, then you might have a decent balance, right? And so I think that's the key. I would challenge people, hey, do you know the other side, the bear side of Tesla so well that you can talk to Tesla bulls and convince them of the bear side, right? I think that's where you need to be. And I think, I don't do it on my channel because I think it would freak people out. I've actually talked to my wife about it. I'm like, I think I should maybe argue the bear side of Tesla just to get people aware of, lots of stuff. And I was like thinking about it in my mind of doing it. Then I'm like, oh man, that might not be good because it actually might convince people, but it's in a sense, it's a great exercise, but then it's hard to distinguish. It's like, hey, is Dave really believing that or not? And like, is he playing with people's minds, etc.? It's a bigger picture where the bull and the bear, right? The pros and the cons, they often are very mixed together, and it isn't as clear or apparent as what first glance might see. There's a lot of complexities, and that's why I think making decisions with investments can be actually quite challenging, and that's the challenge, right? Investments reward your decisions, your decision-making process, and it actually can punish, right, your poor decisions and decision-making processes. All right, guys, fantastic chat with y'all. And I enjoy this stuff a lot, hanging out with you guys. Thank you for supporting the channel, being part of the community, reaching out, liking the video, adding comments, etc. I'm on Twitter as well at HeyDave7. And I'm always looking for some great people to interview who can challenge my views, who are working on the next big thing, who are seeing the world kind of more clearly than others, right? I think that's one of the challenges. If you have some interview suggestions, please reach out. If you could even help out, arranging an interview, if you know somehow, or you can tweet out somebody, that's fantastic. It's surprising how effective tweeting out a person is. Like, for example, if you know somebody that you think that I could interview and it'd be a great interview, if you tweet that person and me together saying, hey, think of, I think you'd be great on Hey Dave 7's show, YouTube show, consider it or something. That's actually huge. It's very powerful because that person then looks at that tweet in their notifications and says, okay, wait, who is this guy? What is his channel? Might watch a video and say, hey, yeah, okay, I'll be on his channel. So it actually works a lot. So in a way, this is a collaborative effort. Joining the channel, subscribing to the channel actually helps too, because it shows, hey, there's people watching, etc. So all of this actually is a flywheel, a beneficial flywheel. It helps people dive into more topics and really learn stuff and create value. Anyways, have a great weekend. We got some cool stuff coming up. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to release a video by one of my favorite real estate investors, Bruce Norris. I've been following him for 15 years. It was a fantastic interview I did. It was yesterday, just making some edits and releasing it. I love this interview. I wish I can have him on again. yeah, check it out. Saturday night, I'm talking to Emmett Peppers about kind of some investment philosophies that he has that he just tweeted out on his account. It'll be released on Sunday, and then Monday we've got a bunch of other cool stuff coming up. Anyways, have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.